Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today and I'm testing out my Blue Yeti microphone for the third time. So in today's video I have a pretty interesting video that I thought would make pretty solid for a midweek upload. And essentially, thanks to Luis Canales, who linked me to this website, he found this pretty interesting power level list of Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z. And you know, it has like actual panels from the manga, so a lot of you would probably think it's legitimate. It's not. There's no official power level list of Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z dating past the Frieza saga, and this one includes all the way to the Buu saga. But in today's video I will analyze, going, through this list, the most important parts, whether or not I think this is a pretty legitimate list or not. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. So let me quickly say that in terms of Dragon Ball power levels, I personally don't really find these as important for one main reason, because Dragon Ball power levels are all guesses. There are some things that I did want to point out though. When you're comparing Goku and Krillin's power level, as you can see here with my cursor, in the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, it makes sense that Goku would have been a little bit stronger than Krillin, but at the same time, it could be argued that Krillin was stronger. As a matter of fact, it was indirectly stated that Krillin was actually stronger than Goku when they were first starting off their training with Master Roshi. So, depending on what point and exact time you want to do it, this could be a little bit inaccurate. Another point I want to bring up that I'll refer to later is Goku's power level here is a 42, and we see later on in the series that Hercule's power level was 67. So I kind of had a problem with that, because I feel like Kid Goku could defeat Hercule primarily for one reason: he was able to take direct bullets from Bulma to the face, whereas Hercule got shot later on in the Buu saga and was almost killed. And I think that really shows a huge transition in the durability of their bodies. Now you could argue that Goku's body is Saiyan and Hercule's isn't, but I mean, at the same time, Master Roshi's gotten shot too and he's taken it, even though it's more for comedic effect. So I think that's one major thing to highlight, that maybe Kid Goku would have been heads and shoulders above Hercule. But that's just one observation. Everything here seems pretty legitimate. There really isn't that much to really talk about here. Everything seems pretty solid. So when we move on, the only thing that I really noticed that really stood out to me was over here, where we see in the King Piccolo saga, we see that Goku's a 260 and Piccolo is a 260 as well, but then we see Mr. Popo and Kami at 310 and 288 respectively. And Blackenfist, who also took a glance at this, was trying to point out that he believes that, technically Mr. Popo should have been a lot stronger than this. He believes that Mr. Popo's power level is somewhere along the lines of Raditz. I think it's a little unsure to guess where his power level is, but it's kind of obvious that based off of this, we can argue that if Mr. Popo and Kami were this strong, they should have been able to beat King Piccolo by themselves, personally. But this is just up for debate. And then we move on to the 23rd Martial Arts Tournament. It's pretty interesting here. Chi-Chi's a 47, which means she's stronger than Kid Goku. I can't really see that too much. Because the whole bullet stain is really something I latch onto. Maybe some of you guys may take that with a grain of salt, but that's just my personal opinion. I think that after a certain power level, no matter where you are in the series, bullets don't affect you, and I can't see Chi-Chi taking a bullet and surviving, personally. Obviously it depends where the bullet hits. But everything seems pretty legitimate here. I do think that Chi-Chi could probably kick Hercule's ass, but especially this is Chi-Chi when she was younger, when she was in her prime. But I mean, obviously everybody's going to have their own opinion, and that's just me personally. There's no specific evidence to support Hercule's power level. It's all speculation, and that's why I think Dragon Ball power levels are a little bit irrelevant. But you know what? Let's just move on to the actual Dragon Ball Z series. Alright, so first things first is Gohan's power level in his Ozaru form stands out a little bit, because if Ozaru always multiplies your power level by 10, even though I'm not a huge fan of multipliers, this would suggest that Gohan's power level was a 210 when he wasn't even training with Piccolo yet, and I can't see Gohan's power level that high, unless you're saying that, maybe some of his hidden power was out, but I just can't see his base power being 210 to multiply to 2100. Son Goku and Piccolo, 334 and 322, pretty accurate from the manga. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something along the lines of these actual figures. So I think these are pretty accurate, especially when Goku and Piccolo took their weighted clothing off. They were very similar in numbers. Raditz's power level is universally recognized at 1200. So, I mean, you know, if Raditz is universally recognized as 1200, if they put 1220, it's really not that big of a deal. Guys, I'm not going for specific accuracy. I'm just saying, I'm just comparing who should be stronger or not. The numbers are all up for interpretation. All right, so all of these seem pretty legitimate. I know for sure Gohan was 1307 when he got angry. As I said before, King Kai and, you know, King Yama, they're really just guesses. I don't feel like these could be legitimate power levels because there was never anything to highlight what their powers were. But, I mean, they would obviously say that if King Yama could handle Raditz in the other world, then he would obviously have to be stronger, but then weaker than Napa. That's up for interpretation. That can go either way. Some people could argue that if he can send Frieza and Cell to hell, that his power should be in the millions. I understand that, but I just personally think Kai and Yama were guesses. Now, Yajirobe, I do not remember him ever being read by a scouter, but I remember for sure Yamcha, Tien, Krillin, and Chaozu were all read. I like that they have the Tien is 250 and Krillin is 206 just to crush Blackenfist's point even more. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm just having fun. But, you know, Tien, Yamcha, Krillin, and Chaozu, these were all directly measured when Bulma used her scouter early in Dragon Ball after she had taken the scouter from Raditz. I just don't know where they got Yajirobe's power level from. But, I mean, if they got it, that's fine. 105 is such a weird power level that nobody really takes into consideration. But I mean, you know, what the hell. He's obviously way above average in terms of strength. Yajirobe does have some fighting ability, so I'll give them that much. So let's go to Napa and the Cybermen. Alright, so I remember when Napa first got to Earth with Vegeta, he was detecting all of their power levels. Tien's Tri-Beam, it was never directly calculated. Yamcha, Tien, we can all kind of find these in the realm of respectability. I don't really see anything here it stands out too much. I know for sure that Gohan's was a 2800, so everything here seems pretty legitimate. The only thing is Piccolo's power level. I really feel like Piccolo is a little too high, and the reason I say this is because Piccolo has a power level of a 3500, and Napa has a power level of a 4000. So which means that Piccolo's power level is only about 13% less of what Napa was prior to Napa pulling it out of his power. Now, the reason I kind of have a problem with this is I feel like if Piccolo was this close to Napa, then he should have held up much better against him. And it was clear that, you know, Napa was toying with him along with taking on Krillin at the same time. So I think that the gap between Piccolo's power and Napa's is a little bit too small for my taste to be that big in a difference of power. Especially and you know, Napa's universally recognized at 4000, even though it was never directly stated. But I just feel like Piccolo should be a little bit weaker than this, even though he's my favorite character. I think maybe along the lines of 2500, maybe 2000 or 2500 would make a lot more sense for Piccolo, in my personal opinion. You know, moving on to Gohan, this was directly taken. There's no problem with that. Kaioken, you know, they just multiplied the power levels, and it kind of makes sense. Goku was clearly stronger than Napa. Napa seemed to hold his own a lot more when he got angry. So I can kind of see this along the lines, but once Goku used Kaioken, the fight was basically over. Chaozu, nobody cares about his power level. I mean, he blew himself up anyways, but I could definitely see Chaozu around this spectrum based off of what we saw earlier in Dragon Ball. So everything here seems pretty legitimate. Alright, so now we move on to the fight with Goku and Vegeta. Essentially, well, I forgot to mention here with Goku that they have this power level at 8100 because they're directly, you know, pointing out the over 8000, because in the manga it was actually over 8000, not over 9000. So I kind of find that kind of funny, but We move on to, the Goku versus Vegeta fight. Kaioken times 2 is, obviously double his power level. Kaioken is just an increase from from what his base power is. I can understand that. So they just basically did a perfect multiplication. Makes sense. Vegeta's power level was obviously around this realm anyways. I feel like when they dropped his power level to 1100, I felt like that was maybe a little bit too much of a drop. I'd say maybe 1500 would have made more sense, because they're basically saying that Vegeta was weaker than Raditz. Even though, Gohan and Krillin and the rest weren't completely healthy, I feel like Vegeta should have been a little bit stronger than 1100, but that's just my personal opinion. This is just all my opinions on everything. Looking at all of this, it seems pretty legitimate. I don't understand how Yajirobe got to 430. I mean, I can't see how Yajirobe's power level basically multiplied all the way from 105 to 430, and he wasn't really training as hard for the Saiyans as compared to the other characters. He I mean, if I remember correctly from the Pendulum episode, they were all training, and Yamcha was training with the rest of the gang, and Yajirobe was sitting there watching. I'm pretty sure that's how it was. So I can't see how Yajirobe got that much stronger. That's just my only problem here, but all of these seem pretty reasonable, even though they were never calculated. So let's move on to the Namek Saga. Vegeta, 24,000, got a Zenkai boost from when he was on Earth. Makes sense to me. Kui, 18,000. Well, I feel like this is just a little bit off, because we saw that Vegeta specifically said that, him and Kui had around the same exact power level. So I would think that Vegeta would have been 18,000 when he was on Earth if Kui's 18,000, or at least really close to it. You can't have an exact number, but it was obvious that Vegeta got a Zenkai boost and was stronger than all of them anyways, so I understand that. Now, after Zarbon had beaten Vegeta up, his power level got a Zenkai boost. I understand that. My problem, however, is when you look at this Zenkai boost, it seems like it's kind of, I guess you can say, minuscule, because we see later on when Vegeta got another Zenkai boost, the Zenkai boost was enormous as compared to here against Zarbon. So maybe it has to do with taking into how close you were to death. But I mean, because remember when Krillin blasted him through the chest, I mean, that was very, very, very inflicting on Vegeta. So I can understand that, but personally, I just don't see Vegeta getting such a small Zenkai boost here and then a huge one later. But obviously the series has to have some way of keeping up with Frieza, and I understand why they did that. The Doria and Zarbon, these are all pretty fair here, so there really isn't much to say. When Gohan was powered up to a 16,000, because of Guru, a lot of people say that should have brought out his full potential. I just felt like that made it easier to bring out his full potential. I feel like that's pretty legitimate, but the way that Vegeta had reacted to Gohan's power-up would suggest that maybe Gohan at this point was stronger than Zarbon and Dodoria. But then again, they were struggling to beat a Captain Ginyu who had a power level of a 23,000, as we see here. So I guess Krillin and Gohan are in a pretty respectable realm. So I can see this happening. Alright, so we see the Ginyu Force, Recoome, Birder, and Jace, all perfect to me, because specifically in the manga, Krillin had said himself that all three of them were all around the same power level. He said that specifically. Guldo is ridiculously weak. I feel like if Guldo was this weak, I mean, Krillin and Gohan should have had no problem with them. But then again, he was beating them primarily because of his techniques, not because of his power. I feel like, especially considering the fact that Guldo had the ability to sense power levels as it was shown through the series, so if he had this ability, I think that he would have been less confident in taking them on, personally. But this is just my honest opinion. Guldo I feel is a bit too weak. I can't see him weaker than Napa, but I guess that's all up for interpretation. Alright, so Vegeta is still the same. Captain Ginyu is a direct translation. Vegeta's Zenkai power. Now, they guessed on this one. I think this is legitimate because prior, Vegeta was struggling to beat Recoome, who had around the same power level as Jace. So, it was clear that Vegeta was much stronger than Jace the second time he found him, and Jace was so surprised. He never read his power level, he just crushed it. So I can understand how they powered up Vegeta to this much. I understand. It makes sense. And he was handling, you know, Ginyu and Goku's body with ease. So I can honestly see this one happening. And then they obviously gave Gohan a power up because he got a Zenkai boost after fighting the Ginyu Force. Makes sense. Alright, Frieza 530,000. Perfect. Makes complete sense. Alright, so now we go against the battle against Frieza. This is how you know this is not legitimate because they can't spell the word against. But either way, Vegeta 240,000. I feel like if Vegeta had this much power in him, I just feel like it's too much of an increase. I mean, to go from 76,000 to 240,000, they were basically saying that Vegeta's true power was at 240,000. Now, if this is true, if Vegeta's true power is this high, then it doesn't make any sense to me how he would have been 76,000 earlier. I would think Vegeta would at least be in the 100,000s, but were you really thinking Vegeta was holding back this much power? I mean, he did hold his own with Frieza, I understand, but I just felt like they should have given him a higher reading up here if his power was really this much. I don't have a problem with the power level, I just have a problem with the earlier reading. My problem with this is that if Frieza's power is 530,000, now he and Vegeta didn't really fight, they just basically held hands and then Frieza backed off. But I mean, really, if you look at it, Vegeta's power level is literally less than half of Frieza's, so even in that case, with Vegeta's true full power, Frieza should have still made work out of him, considering the fact that he's more than double his power. So if anything, Vegeta's power should have been even closer, but it just doesn't make sense to me how that Zenkai boost would have put him that high, but I understand. They have to think of something to put in between. So this is the inconsistency I find here. Frieza did say if I had a scouter rating, it would say my power level would increase over 1 million. I understand, it makes perfect sense to get to this. For his third form, they basically just multiplied the power level. So basically, for Frieza, as you can see, they're basically just multiplying his power level because 1,160,000 is basically a perfect multiplication of this times 2. And then this one is basically a perfect multiplication of this times 2. Makes perfect sense for Piccolo to be stronger than Frieza in his second form, especially when he took off his weighted clothing, when he was ready to, you know, beat Frieza because he probably didn't know Frieza had an extra transformation. It made perfect sense. I see nothing wrong here at all, personally. So I can see this taking place. Frieza at, you know, obviously suppressing a lot of his power would be at, you know, 4.240 million. Makes sense. Vegeta obviously got that Zenkai boost and he was able to kick Gohan and help him dodge that Frieza blast. So it makes sense for Vegeta to have been stronger than what Piccolo was. I can see that. Krillin got to 22,000. Now if we see up here, Krillin was a 14,000. I don't see how Krillin got stronger. But I talked to Vegito 1089 a while back, and he was saying that, you know, because of the Elder Kai's, you know, power boost, they were saying throughout the manga, you know, and I remember this, that Krillin's power was rising, you know, throughout the series. So I can understand how Krillin, you know, maybe more of the hidden power was, or more of the abilities that the Elder Kai brought out were coming out. So I can understand that. It's so minuscule anyways compared to the rest that it's kind of irrelevant. Gohan's Zenkai power 84,000, which means that he could hold his own with Captain Ginyu. Well, actually not really Ginyu, but he could beat all the Ginyu Force members. I can see that now. When he got mad, 1.6 million. I can see that. Now we go on to Goku versus Frieza. Now, here's the thing. Goku's Kaioken over here times 20 is 60 million. And I'm going to point out something later on that shows a true contradiction with this. However, we see that Frieza at 100% is 120 million. Now, this has been reported on so many sources, so this seems pretty legitimate. However, this would suggest strongly that if 120 million is his 100% power, then that would mean that 10% of his power would be 12 million. So it kind of makes sense, because they're basically saying that Frieza was using like 3 to 4% of his power when he was fighting Vegeta, which is pretty reasonable, especially because Frieza directly set his power level and Goku thought he was bluffing, but Frieza was being serious. So I can understand this. I think this is a pretty legitimate argument to be put at held. So I think this is pretty fair. Obviously, Frieza was putting out more power the longer the fight was drawing out. So these are just all perfect numbers. And, you know, Frieza's ki diminished. Nobody really cares this much about this. Goku obviously had the edge. I will point out, though, that in the actual manga, it was said that, you know, Goku was much stronger than what the anime made him look like. The anime made a Frieza 100% look a lot stronger against Super Saiyan Goku than the manga did. In the manga, Goku was clearly stronger even though he took some hits. Piccolo's power level stayed the same, Gohan stayed the same, Krillin stayed the same. Understand, this is pretty serious and legitimate, because 150 million and 120 million have always been the pretty legitimate sources for indicating power levels. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, though, is that they have said many times in Dragon Ball Z that a Super Saiyan multiplier is 50 times. So 3 times 50 is a perfect 1 million. So in reality, it does make sense. You can see it. Alright. Another Super Saiyan. Now, let me point something out really quickly that now that I'm looking at the picture, that I should have mentioned. If Vegeta's a 2.4 million and Goku's a 3 million, that means Vegeta's not that far from what Goku was. And the way that Vegeta reacted to seeing Goku's strength would suggest that Goku was stronger, but based off of how the math adds up perfectly, there's no debate for that. Here's the biggest problem I see with this entire list. The entire list. Mecha Frieza is an 8.5 million. Now, what does this mean? That means that basically this Mecha Frieza is around, if 12 million is 10%, they're basically saying that Mecha Frieza is less than 10% of Frieza when he was on Namek. I have a huge problem with this. I have a major problem because the scientists were saying that, you know, he had an upgrade. Even in the manga, even though that whole filler scene of, you know, Frieza being resurrected and putting on a ship wasn't there, it was clear that, you know, Frieza had pointed out that I'm stronger now to fight the Saiyan. It would make sense that if Frieza had an actual power boost. Now, and these are professionals who are working on his body. They can understand how strong Frieza got. I cannot see how Frieza got this much weaker in his Mecha Frieza form. I mean, you're basically saying he wasn't even near what he was on Namek. I have a huge problem with this, and King Cold is barely stronger than him. I have a problem with that too. Piccolo got stronger, Vegeta got stronger, Gohan got stronger. I guess if you take it to Garlic Jr., but that was filler, so that doesn't really matter. But I mean, and especially when they're using manga panels, but I guess they just want to make Gohan stronger over time. I understand. Tien, the rest of them got stronger, still proving that Tien's stronger than Krillin, you know, just to beat Blackenfist's argument again. But one thing is that we'll see later on that this Goku Super Saiyan power is a little bit misleading, and this Trunks Super Saiyan is basically saying that Trunks was slightly stronger than what Goku was on Namek, which is a little debatable, because you would think that if Frieza should have gotten stronger when he came back in Mecha Frieza form. He should have held up much better against Trunks. But then again, he was killed off guard, so it kind of makes sense. So I felt like the Trunks and the Goku one were a little bit misleading. I think that Trunks should be like maybe around a 190 to 200. I don't think he was this much weaker than Goku. That's just my opinion. And I think the Frieza fight plays justice to that. Now we move on to the Android Saga. Let's see here. Goku 6 million, and his power level is 4 million here. Now, here's the thing. They didn't directly say it, but they should have mentioned, they put these dots that suggest that Goku being weakened by a virus. And Piccolo did hint in the manga that Goku's power should have been more potent when he was fighting Android 19. So, as we see here, Goku had a 210 million when he came back to Earth, but this Goku in the Android Saga has a 200 million, which means that this Goku's actually weaker than Goku 3 years later. I have a problem with that, because even if the heart virus is weakening him, I can't see Goku weaker than what he was 3 years ago. I just can't see that. Maybe put him at like a 220 or a 230 million, but you can't say like Goku's weaker than what he was 3 years ago. Even if he's a little bit stronger because the virus weakens him, I can't see him weaker 3 years later. I just can't. It's too much training to really just factor all of that in. Gohan's a 3 million, so now he's stronger than Frieza's second form. Makes sense, but it still shows that Gohan's not strong enough to take on Frieza by himself. I can understand that. Krillin 450,000 was training for the android threat. I understand that. So these are all pretty legitimate. Goku Weakened. I don't know if they mean weakened by the virus or if he's weakened after being beaten up by 19. That's a huge debate, but I can't see Goku being weaker than what he was 3 years ago. I just can't see it. That's why I think the problem comes in. Dr. Gero and Android 19. Now, Blackenfist and I talked a lot about this one. I know some of you are going to disagree. I can't see 19 and 20 being weaker than Frieza. When you factor all of this in, Android 19 managed to do... I know that Vegeta was toying with him, but Android 19 did hold his own with Super Saiyan Goku and managed to take a lot of blows with him, even though Goku was being weakened, and he did do some damage on Vegeta. Vegeta beat him relatively easily, but it wasn't like a complete cakewalk domination. And this suggests that Vegeta's more like almost 3 times the power level of Android 19. I can't see that. I can't see 19 being weaker than Frieza. Especially, considering the fact that, Dr. Gero... Well, this was all an inconsistency too, in regards to how he got Frieza's, cells right before he met his end by the hands of Trunks, and that means he should have known about a Super Saiyan. That's always been an inconsistency. I've pointed that out in one of my older videos. It's just something that Toriyama probably made a mistake with, especially when you factor in the timeline that Cell comes from. There was no future Trunks to ever come to that timeline in the first place, so that makes no sense how he extracted Frieza's DNA without getting Super Saiyan in the future timeline and in the present. Makes no sense. But either way, just moving on. Glad I pointed that out. I just can't see 19 and Dr. Gero weaker. Piccolo at this point was stronger than what Frieza was on Namek. But this is with 3 additional years of training, and to say that 19 and 20 were weaker than Frieza at this point, I just cannot see it. I just can't. Especially if Gero has knowledge of Frieza's power, I just can't see it. That's just my personal opinion. There isn't a lot to support it. It's just subjective, and power levels are subjective. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you can see 19 and 20 being weaker than Frieza. I just can't. If they were weaker than Frieza, the fight should have been over in seconds, just to be honest. Alright, so we see Tien 1.1 million, Yamcha 230. Nobody really cares that much there. Vegeta 5 million. They did say that he was theoretically stronger than Goku. I think that Goku was never at full strength, obviously hinted here with being weaker than what he was a year ago, but that's debatable. what's funny is that Piccolo's base form is stronger than Vegeta's base form when he has this weighted clothing, which I find kind of weird. But when he goes to 168 and Vegeta goes to 250, it doesn't even really matter. It's such a difference. But this does suggest, though, that Piccolo was able to beat Yajirobe in 19, which, you know, Piccolo was going to jump in and save Goku anyways, so I can see that happening. I don't have a problem with that in particular. So these are a little bit skewed. As we mentioned, Goku's power level is a bit inconsistent, especially when they put his weakened. We can't really differentiate it. I feel like Goku should have been much closer to Vegeta if he was at full strength. When comparing 18 and 17, this suggests that 17 is around 8% stronger than 18. They did say that his power was slightly suppressed. 8%, that's pretty big, you know, and I talked to Vegito 1089 about this. 8% is enough to make a considerable difference, so I would think that 18 was a little bit closer to 17 than this suggests, but maybe she was around a 290 or a 285, because I would consider them like Goten and Trunks in terms of strength, but that's just you know, after reading the manga where they said 18's power was slightly suppressed, but it is definitely said in the manga that 17 was stronger than 18, so I understand that. Trunks' power being 170 million is almost nothing compared to what he was at 160, so that means he barely got stronger. Now we do have to point out that the timing for his future coming back to the past is different from what it was in the past itself, so I understand that. Just saying that I can't see Trunks getting such a minuscule power boost. I mean, it's like, what did he do? You know, but then again, training is kind of hard in his time anyways, so let's move on from here. Cell appears. We see 17, 18, same power. Cell is 220. So this suggests that when Cell, you know, had his max power after absorbing all those humans, he went up to a 390 million. Tien Shenhan with his, they call it Shin Kikoho, which we would know as Tri-Beam. It's basically the exact same power level as Imperfect Cell. That's up for debate. I mean, it was holding back Semi-Perfect Cell for a while, but a lot of people probably would disagree with that. Looking at 16, he's at 380 million, which is around the same as Imperfect Cell, so I understand. They gave Imperfect Cell a slight nudge on on 16. I understand that. Piccolo fusing with Kami is 265 million. At his max power, he's 310. So this suggests that he was a little bit stronger than 17 and a decent amount stronger than 18, but not by too much. Understand that, and he's clearly weaker than 16. Makes sense to me. But because his power would be declining due to fatigue, it makes sense. This really isn't that big of a problem for me. You know, this seems all pretty legitimate. So I don't understand how Cell's second form just went to 570 million. Maybe he put more power. Maybe he was holding back over here. Makes sense if that's the case. Looking at Trunks at 480 million, Vegeta at 500 million. That, in comparison to second form Cell, is pretty close. When they both go into their ultimate Super Saiyan forms, even though they both call him Super Saiyan, they don't differentiate him. They're way stronger than Imperfect Cell, so that makes a lot of sense. I can see that. Trunks here at 920 billion. I feel like if he was at 920 billion here, he should have been stronger than Cell in terms of power. But Cell was faster, but Cell said that Trunks was actually considerably stronger than he was. But when we see Cell get super bulky too, it just obviously closes out the gap as to the whole power difference. So I think these are all pretty legitimate. A Final Flash was able to, you know, basically hurt Cell, even though Cell was holding back against these guys at the same time. I mean, he really didn't get that much of a Zenkai boost. I mean, the only real damage that Cell took was from that Final Flash itself. And I wouldn't consider that enough to be a Zenkai boost, you know. So I can see all of this being pretty legitimate, and they do suggest that Vegeta was stronger than Trunks. Trunks thought he was stronger because of that extra form, but Vegeta chose not to use it. So, I can understand that. Cell games. Hercule 64, I already mentioned before how I had a problem with that as compared to a younger Goku and a Chi-Chi, but, I mean, it's all up for interpretation. Tien got a little bit stronger in that gap, I guess. Krillin, same. Yamcha, same. Android 16, same. Cell, no, this is Cell earlier. Now, here's the thing. Piccolo here is an 820 million, and I did a video not that long ago, how strong is Piccolo at the end of the series. If we're going by their list, Piccolo at 820 million is way stronger than second form Cell. So this would mean that Piccolo was a lot stronger than even I took him for. If he was this strong, and this is with his weighted clothing, we don't even see what Piccolo is without it, but if this is really Piccolo, he's a lot stronger than I thought he could have been. I mean, they're basically saying Piccolo was stronger than Vegeta and Trunks when they fought second form Cell. Now, here's something interesting that I pointed out that I wish I had said in the video. Piccolo, do you guys know that when Piccolo went into the hyperbolic time chamber, he was actually stronger than what Vegeta and Trunks were when they went in? I'm not saying he would be stronger coming out, because obviously Saiyans, their power level multiplies at a rate way higher than what Piccolo could possibly do. But he did have an edge on them, because as we see here, when Piccolo had fused with Kami, he had a power level 265 million. That's way higher than the 250 million that Vegeta had. Well, it's actually not that much higher. Well, actually Piccolo's full power was 310. So this Piccolo was considerably stronger than Vegeta and considerably stronger than the 170 million Trunks, who's I thought was way too weak. I felt like Trunks should have been way closer to Vegeta in power level, but he was stronger than both Vegeta and Trunks when they went in the hyperbolic time chamber. So I can understand how he could be considerably stronger. I just can't see him stronger than those two Ascended Saiyans. And if he's stronger than second form Cell, I can't see him being that much stronger than second form Cell. I mean, this Piccolo would mop the floor with second form Cell. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The Cell Jr. is 2.4 billion. Vegeta Super Saiyan 2.2 billion. Trunks 1.85 billion. I feel like Trunks is was way too weak compared to Vegeta. Trunks should be a little bit closer in my personal opinion. Because Vegeta and Trunks earlier had a pretty similar gap. You know, Vegeta and Trunks were the only ones who really held their own with the Cell Juniors. Piccolo did a little bit, but he didn't really hold his own that well. So I can understand, and this also suggests that if Goku was healthy, he would have the ability to stop a Cell Junior. I can understand that. Gohan, they were saying that his power level could be higher than Goku's. I can understand that too, when Cell had also pointed it out, and Cell obviously held back less against Gohan. So really Cell was holding back a lot of his powers for many of the fights. He was holding it back against Vegeta, he was holding it, you know, back against Goku. So really Cell didn't really bring out his full power until Gohan went Super Saiyan 2. So I can understand that. You know, the Cell Jr. is still here. Cell powered up more. I can understand that. And here's Gohan as Super Saiyan 2. Now, if they're going by this suggests that Gohan Super Saiyan 2 is actually stronger than Super Perfect Cell. I already pointed out in the manga, I never said that Gohan was weaker. I just said that there was more evidence to support Cell being stronger than Gohan in the manga, especially because of the fact that after that, number one, Cell damaged Gohan severely with that blast. A blast that was intended to hurt Vegeta, not Gohan. A blast that was intended to hurt Vegeta. And also when Cell said enough playing around, that did hint that Cell wasn't really going at his full power when he had hurt Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. So that's why I said there was more evidence to support it. However, other people could suggest otherwise, and you know, it's obvious that, you know, if Gohan had fought Cell, I mean, Cell would have done a much better job than he did earlier, but we never really got a chance to see the fight. So really, this is kind of like a two-sided of the argument type of thing. You know, so we see this, Cell's max power when he got really buffed, all of this is all irrelevant. Vegeta being super angry is 2.2 billion. I would feel that he would be stronger because of rage, that's my honest opinion. But honestly, this is all up for interpretation. They feel like Gohan's Super Kamehameha was stronger than Cell's. Personally, I feel like, I mean, that could be debatable, but it was suggested that Cell's was much stronger than Gohan's, and you know, Gohan got a lucky break from Vegeta. But really, it's all up for you guys. I'd love to see what you guys think in the comment section below. This video is already gone for a long time, so those of you who really want to see this are still sticking around. Alright, so let's see here. We go to the Buu Saga, and we have Goten and Trunks around the same power level. You know, Goten and Trunks both agreed that Trunks was a little bit stronger. Can understand that. Similar to 17 and 18, but just a little bit closer. Punta 38, he's a weakling. Krillin is a little bit stronger than what he was years ago. I mean, that is debatable, because, I mean, it's implied that Krillin really didn't train for years, and he's a human, so we would think his power level would decline. I personally think that Krillin's power level would have declined, but, you know, maybe he put in some training. I just can't see him stronger than what he was 7 years ago. 7 years is a long time to slack off, especially if Gohan can get weaker. Alright, so Supreme Kai is 3.6 billion, which means that Supreme Kai can beat a Cell Jr., and he's definitely stronger than Piccolo. I can understand that, I pointed that out. Piccolo is 1.45 billion. So this means that Piccolo here is actually weaker than a Cell Jr. So they would disagree with what I said in the video. I would feel like he was strong enough to take on a Cell Jr. 7 years later. They obviously thought differently, and I can understand that. But Piccolo obviously was aware that it was a Supreme Kai, and his power level was off the charts, so I can understand all this. Kibito is a 40 million, which means that he's weaker than Android 19 and 20. I mean, that's up for grabs. Gohan, 70 million powering up, I can understand that. Spopovich and Yamu, their power levels are interchangeable, nobody really cares. Videl is a little bit stronger than Hercule. I would think the gap between Videl and Hercule was a little bit bigger. I wouldn't put Videl this high. I don't think she could beat a lot of those characters from Dragon Ball, but that's just my personal opinion. She could fly, but she really had no mastery of Kai, and I can't see Videl beating a kid Goku. I just can't. That's just my honest opinion. But she is very respectable in terms of fighting for regular humans. So, we see Gohan Super Saiyan 2 is 7 billion. Now, this is a little bit interesting because it shows that his power declined, but not drastically from when he was a kid. This is suggesting that this Gohan is weaker than Super Perfect Cell, but still way stronger than regular Perfect Cell. I can understand that. Goten and Trunks 270 and 285, I mentioned before, they're close, but this means that Goten and Trunks are able to are around the same strength as Android 17 and 18. Yosun Goku and his friends return would suggest that Goten and Trunks were closer to that around Frieza. But I mean, if Goten and Trunks are, you know, that strong, I mean, they did struggle, you know, against their little fight with 18, which was hinted more in the filler episode than it actually was in the manga. But, you know, I just personally feel like 18 could considerably beat Goten and Trunks without a problem individually. That's just my opinion. Now we go on to Goku versus Vegeta. Vegeta is 85 million, Goku is 100 million in their base forms. Gohan in his base form, I'm guessing this is his base form, is 70. So this is suggesting that Gohan, although weaker than Goku and Vegeta, was not that much weaker. You know, I can understand that to a degree. But I mean, it's really up for interpretation. Goku at Super Saiyan is 5 billion. Gohan at Super Saiyan is 3.5 billion. They're basically just doing perfect multiplication. Can understand that. Now here's the thing. Vegeta Majin Super Saiyan 2 is 10 billion and Goku Super Saiyan 2 is 10 billion. So they had him at equal. But since Vegeta's base is weaker than Goku's base, this would suggest that Vegeta's Majin made him closer to Goku than what we would realize, you know. Because if we do the same exact math, then it would come out to Vegeta being an 8.5 billion compared to Goku's Super Saiyan 2, which is 10 billion, which means that Vegeta's real Super Saiyan 2 is 8.5 billion, as we'll see later on. So I can understand that. It makes sense. The Majin obviously gave him a power-up. Now here's an interesting thing. Deborah is a 4 billion. This means that when Goku said we fought a guy 7 years ago who's around the same strength as Cell, they were comparing Deborah's power level to regular Perfect Cell. So this is definitely suggesting that Deborah was weaker than Gohan if he had gone Super Saiyan 2. They're thinking that Gohan was not Super Saiyan 2 when he fought Deborah. I personally thought he must have had to have been to hold his own for that long. Doesn't make any sense why Gohan wouldn't go Super Saiyan 2, just doesn't. But I mean, if this is true, they're thinking Deborah is a lot weaker than what I personally thought he was. And you guys will see a video in the future, you know, in where I do a video with Cell versus Deborah to highlight this a little bit more. But yeah, they think Deborah's around the strength of regular Perfect Cell. Can understand that. Yajirobe is 1.34. Nobody cares too much about these guys. Pui is a joke. But they do think that Piccolo could take on Yajirobe. I think so too. So I think that's pretty legitimate. Let's see here. As we see, Majin Buu is 11 billion. Majin Buu is holding back at many points. Now here's where controversy hits. Super Saiyan 3 Goku is 30 billion. Fat Buu is 25 billion. They're thinking that Super Saiyan 3 Goku is not that much stronger than Fat Buu. Goku said he could have beaten him earlier if, you know, he had powered up, you know, fully. I can understand that. But I would think that Goku would have been a little bit stronger than Fat Buu here. But here it gets a lot more controversial. Nobody cares about Vegeta's final explosion blast because it really didn't do much. It did destroy Buu, but Buu just regenerated. Goten and Trunks still around the same. So all these power levels are relatively similar. But, you know, keep in mind about this Goku thing. So now we move on to more of the Fusion Saga. Gohan got stronger with training. 80 million. You know, obviously Gohan's power level, you know, was still weaker than Vegeta and Goku's, but with some training I can understand the increase. Mr. Satan the same. Majin Buu getting even more enraged. Well, actually weakening because he's 25 billion over here. Now here's Evil Buu at 29 billion. We'll see later on that Evil Buu here is actually the same exact strength as Kid Buu. That's a little debatable, but I mean, there's so many Buu forms, it's hard to be consistent with all of them. He was considerably stronger than Fat Buu, so I can accept this. I could legitimately accept this. And Super Buu is 52 billion, which is basically a perfect addition of Fat Buu plus Evil Buu, so I can understand that. Now Son Gohan Saikyo no Senshi, I did a translation that means warrior of approval. 70 billion, that means he is way stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. It's not even close. He's more than twice his strength. A lot of people would think that Super Saiyan 3 Goku was a lot closer, but they obviously think Gohan's way stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Super Saiyan 3 Goten is 54 billion. He's almost twice the strength of Goku 2. I mean, he's 2.4 times, I'm sorry, not 2.4, but he's almost twice the strength. 54 billion to 30 billion is huge. Goku did say that, you know, that he was pretty impressed with Goten's power level as a Super Saiyan 3. So, I can understand that. Now, I already pointed out in one of my earlier videos, I thought Super Saiyan 3 Goku was stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goten, even though you guys have convinced me to change my opinion, because of the fact that when, you know, we see later on when Buu was transforming, Goku said, why is his power level increasing instead of decreasing? And previously his power level was regular Super Buu because they had taken out everybody else. So I'm saying if his power level's increasing, then that would suggest that Kid Buu was stronger than regular Super Buu. However, you guys pointed out in the comment section that they were referring to Buff Buu. So I'm glad that you guys pointed that out. So they clearly think Gotenks is stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Alright, so we move on from there. Now, Super Buu with Gotenks absorbed is 110 billion. It's almost as if you added this Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks and regular Fat Buu, regular Super Buu perfectly, so I can understand that with just a little bit of an extra boost, I guess. So Gotenks, I guess you could say Buu-Tenks was considerably stronger than Gohan. I can accept that. And we move on here. Gohan, same power. Kibito Shenkai, 7.8 billion, which means that he is stronger than, he's around the strength of a super perfect cell. I wouldn't think that Supreme Kai was ever that strong, but I'm guessing there's someone basing his power level that he's 1,000 times the strength of Frieza, but what form of Frieza were they referring to? It's all up for grabs, but it is what it is. We see here that Vegito Super Saiyan is 475 billion, way stronger than Buhan. I can understand this, and in the manga, remember, it's more implied that Vegito was not stronger than Buhan when he was actually in his base form. The reason why is because he didn't toy around and do all that stuff. He directly went into his Super Saiyan form. Now here's the thing. He did, Buu did turn him into chocolate and he was beating him into chocolate, which, was something else. So obviously people are going to think that, Vegito could have beaten him there, but, I mean, he did directly go into his Super Vegito form in the manga. That's something interesting. And here's an interesting thing. In the manga, he was actually called Vegirod instead of Vegito. Pretty interesting fact in case you guys didn't know. Alright, so Tien is a 5.5 million here. Adds more to the fact of beating Blackenfist's argument about Tien versus Krillin. I would suggest that all those years that Tien would have gotten stronger. Blackenfist disagrees. We agree on most things, but that's just something we just don't. I respect that. Just gives me more ammo. Buu Piccolo 56 billion, which means that he's stronger than regular Super Buu, but still not that strong. I would think Buu Piccolo would still be a little bit stronger, maybe around like 65 billion or something. Goku said that Gohan could handle you now. He clearly was confident in Gohan beating him, but not himself. So that would kind of suggest that he would be stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. But it would make sense because Super Buu is stronger, so Buu Piccolo would still be stronger than regular Super Buu, especially because they said he lost about 1/3 of his strength. This would suggest that he lost a little bit more than just 1/3. But that's up for interpretation. Now we go here to the Kid Buu fight. Hercules, same power level. Son Goku max power Super Saiyan 3 is 40 billion. Still considerably weaker than Gotenks. But, I mean, considerably stronger than both Kid Buu and Fat Buu. That's probably going to be something that a lot of people would remember. Vegito Super Saiyan 2 here is 8.5 billion, which suggests that the Majin gave him a big boost. Fat Buu 23 billion. They had him at 25 earlier, but I mean, he did have, when they took the Fat Buu out, remember that was basically, I guess you could say, like a pure Fat Buu, as weird as that may sound, because that Fat Buu was mixed with a lot of other fighters, so I guess he could take a slight decrease. I just don't think by that little. I mean, it's so minuscule anyways, especially considering earlier they had Fat Buu's power level at 23 million here. They've been very inconsistent with Fat Buu's power levels, but this seems pretty legitimate here. The Universal Spirit Bomb 150 billion. It's weaker than Vegito, but I mean, what can you say? So there you have it. So Kid Buu's weaker than Super Saiyan 3 Goku by a little bit. They have Kid Buu at the exact same power level as Evil Buu, and that basically concludes it here. So to close this video out, I wanted to explain this last thing they had here, interestingly enough, about Fusion Potara. They have a fusion where the minimum power level that you fuse into multiplies by 2 for both characters, because they're the same power level, and then it multiplies by 15. So that's basically what fusion does. It multiplies your power level by 2 because there's 2 of you, and then by 15. So here's a suggestion, here's an example that they have here. You know, for example, when Goten and Trunks had trained, you know, Trunks has to drop his power level a little bit to fuse with Goten. So now they're both at 6 million, right? So that would be the B, because, you know, if obviously A is bigger than B, then they have to drop it to B's power, the minimum power level, and then their power level would multiply by 2 to get to 12 million, and then you multiply 12 by 15 to get to 180 million. Makes sense. It's a pretty good formula. It's obviously made up. This doesn't exist, but it's a pretty good way of showing, you know, at least to some degree, how they think fusion would work. It's a creative idea, and obviously Goten's power level would increase later by the Super Saiyan multipliers. And then we see later here where we have Vegeta and Goku. Obviously Goku drops his power level by a little bit, you know, to fuse with Vegeta, so his power would go down to 85 million. You multiply that by 2, then you multiply by 15 to get to Gogeta's power level. Now here is the only case where we see Vegito in terms of fusion, A plus B times 50. So let's say, so it's a perfect fusion, they don't have to be the same. So it would mean that Goku's power level would add to Vegeta's power level. I'll put it for you guys on the screen. So as we see here, it would be 85 million with the plus 100, 3, 4, 5, 6 equals this. And then if you take that and you multiply that by 50, you should get 925. So let's see, that 9.25 is basically exactly how they got this Vegito power level here. So it basically adds up to how Vegito is a much stronger fusion than, you know, Gogeta actually is. It's not even close, and that basically does it. So the only thing I want to point out is that Super Vegito, with all that electricity, it looks like he's a Super Saiyan 2, but I mean, that's really up for grabs. I don't look at electricity to value fights, but just to be a little bit fun here, guys, if this is legitimately the power level for Vegito at this at this 9.25 billion, then if we take this and we multiply his power level by 50, we get 406.25. So this is actually a little bit higher than, you know, what I had actually calculated, and you guys saw me do the math itself. Then if you take that Super Saiyan power level and you multiply that by 2, this is theoretically what Super Saiyan 2 Vegito's power level would be like. And if you take Super Saiyan 2, I think Super Saiyan 2 is a perfect, basically what happens is once you have a Super Saiyan 3 power level, it takes what your Super Saiyan 2 is and it multiplies that. So as you guys can see earlier, where you have Goku's Super Saiyan is 5 and his Super Saiyan 3 theoretically should be 40 billion because it multiplies it by 8. That means that Super Saiyan 2 is basically that multiplying it by 2. I know it sounds a little bit confusing. So if this is Vegito's Super Saiyan 2, then let's try to find out what his Super Saiyan 3 should be. Alright, so I don't understand, guys, that this has been a long video. I'm just trying to make sure that all my numbers are right here. So it would basically be a Super Saiyan 2, which is 10 billion times 4. So it's going to be whatever this is times 4, which this would be Super Saiyan 3 Vegito theoretically, guys. That is 3, 6, 8 9 zeros. So yeah. So this, he's definitely in the, if this would be the millions, then this would be the billions, and this would be the trillions. So he would have literally a power level of 3.7 trillion. And there you have it, guys. If I said trillion instead of quadrillion, who cares? I'm just having fun. This is all basically how it is. I think overall that this was a pretty interesting idea for a video. Obviously, there's no way to be right with power levels. I'd like to thank Luis Canales for showing me this. I think it's a pretty interesting way to show how everything plays out. I disagree with some things, but this has inspired me to do my own power level series. I made one video a long time ago about, you know, the Frieza, the post Namek Saga power levels. I'm going to think of my way on how to legitimately put this all together. And, you know, I think hopefully if I could think of a legitimate way to do it, it could all work out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching, and please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And remember, guys, this is fake, it's not real. And have a good one.